You've talked about, we've talked about, other people have talked about the fact that the 21st century is in many ways the century of biology. In your mind, what does that mean?
Fundamentally, I'm very much a techno-optimist type. I think biology offers the solution to many of humankind's biggest problems. We have all these diseases we need to be able to diagnose, treat, and even potentially cure. Got to figure out how to reduce the number of petrochemicals and the manufacturing process for clothes and other household goods. And so I think biology really offers many solutions to these problems that affect the whole world. And if you look at the progress over the last couple of decades, last decade in particular, I think scientists' ability to read, write, and edit biology has just continued to compound, and that's unlocked so much potential for the world.
I think we share that optimism for what this coming century has brought and will continue to bring as we are able to learn biology more effectively. The way I simplistically look at it is, if we look over the course of this century, a couple of things will prove to be true, I believe. Number one, we will really sort of unravel the mysteries of biology. Number two, I think our ability to solve problems in human health that come from that will, I think, also accelerate dramatically. And number three, and you touched on it already, is I think we will be, and hopefully able to reshape the world in many ways as we get better at harnessing the power that biology brings. Our tools are not quite yet surgical in terms of our ability to intervene with and edit biology, but getting better, right? We've gone from sledgehammers to scalpels. For me, the thing that's most optimistic is that, at some level, biotechnology has got its swagger back. There'll be lots of misses along the way, but I think that's reason to be optimistic, the fact that we're taking those swings as an industry.
It's a perfect transition to talk about tools and the tools that scientists now have that perhaps they didn't have 12 years ago when Benchling started. So you're 12 years into Benchling. You serve over 200,000 scientists, 1,200 biotechs and biopharma companies, 32 countries. You're over $200 million in revenue annualized. If there were a movie about the Benchling journey, give us the trailer for the folks who are not familiar.
Sure. 12 years ago, software engineer gets a job in a biology lab. He's pretty good with a pipette, so hands are okay. Can do some wet lab experiments. Can't for the life of him understand why he has to keep a paper lab notebook and print pictures out and tape them in, and why all the software that does exist looks like it's from and feels like it's from 1995, and then all the modern software is just too general purpose to be useful for biology. And he's really frustrated, and in a grand moment of naivety thinks like, how hard can it be to build good software for biologists? And that was how Benchling was born. It's 2012. Majority, if you were to look at all the biopharmaceutical pipelines, majority of medicines were chemistry based. They were small molecules. Mm-hmm. There were no approved cell therapies, no approved gene therapies. I think the first CRISPR-Cas9 major paper got published sometime in 2012. So like gene editing still in like mainframe days with zinc fingers and stuff like that. I didn't really grasp any of that. Like, I thought biology was really cool. I thought these were people doing important work, and I thought they needed better tools. And so like that was enough for me to start working on the problem. And you fast forward about 12 years, and sort of if I reflect back, our kind of reason to exist hasn't changed. It's bring modern software to scientists. Obviously the industry has changed. Biologics, advanced modalities are now majority of the pipeline. We actually have approved cell therapies, gene therapies. We're the first gene editing medicines approved. So it's been unbelievable to watch the progress, but I'd be lying if I said I could predicted any of that. And what we focus on today, a couple different things. First, and foremost, we help digitize and automate a lot of lab workflows. And so the goal there is like build technology that helps scientists do more science. Our software is built in a way where it helps the biotech companies and pharma companies really aggregate and capture a lot of high quality scientific data. I think that's become especially important and much more obvious now that sort of machine learning and AI is beginning to really converge with biology. And then the last thing we really do is like give scientists tools that they love to supercharge their own productivity and to enable collaboration. All this in service of helping bring these life transforming products and medicines and other products to market faster.
With the benefit of 12 years of hindsight, Like, why hasn't the industry been, more motivated to adopt modern software sooner? Like, why did it require someone, a naive software engineer in a biology lab, to come up with this?
I think there's sometimes this like unfair caricature that people in pharma like don't know how to turn on a computer, and that the industry just like doesn't believe in technology and so forth. I don't think belief in the technology is like lacking. I think people very much, these are all the same people who have iPhones and other consumer apps, and they use technology in all other facets of their life. I think the reality is that two things happened. One, you had like a technology shift. You went from sort of chemistry to biology, and the data and the technological needs of serving biology are very, very different. You have an incredibly complex multidimensional data model. That's happening while the instrumentation in the lab is now, vastly generating more data than ever before. And in biology, like you're sort of inventing a process to make something. And so the software needs to be really flexible because you don't know how you're going to do the thing you're setting out to do fundamentally. And I think the largest companies realized this, and they invested a lot in their own. They built it themselves. These are large pharma companies. They have plenty of resources to do that. They homegrew their software, but at the end of the day, like they're drug companies, right? I mean, we are 800 people today. I think about 40% of our team works in R&D, probably spend $100 million a year on R&D. And like, that's what I feel like it takes to like keep up and to build a scalable platform that can really serve how fast cutting edge science is moving.
So let's talk about the AI opportunity. It's obviously captured the imagination of folks across industries over the last couple of years with the ChatGPT moment and the application of large language models across data domains. If this is the century of biology, data is going to be a key part of it. It's a very data-rich environment. What is the opportunity at the 50,000-foot view for AI in biology?
I think there's two opportunities. I think these new bio AI models are going to 10x the number of really high quality ideas for therapeutic molecules. The place where I think is underappreciated, where AI and machine learning is going to have an impact, it's in the rest of drug discovery. Like that is finding is very important to pick the right targets, and having a good molecule very, very important. But there's so much toil that goes into taking a medicine from an idea to animal studies to in people to figure out your process to scale it up and manufacture it at small scale and then large scale. Like it's an unbelievable challenge to get a drug to market. And I think there's an opportunity. There's so much sort of knowledge work and other types of sort of toil outside of like the eureka moment when you find the right molecule to go after. And I think AI technologies are an opportunity to like reinvent some of them.
AI models are only good as the data that they're trained on. You have a lot of these general large language models that a lot of consumers have used that are trained on the corpus of internet data, as well as other private data sources. What do the life sciences industry need to do to fully appreciate the value of the data that they're sitting on using AI?
I think the life science industry has got to get its data organized. Biotech companies are generating extremely high volume, very multidimensional. I think you'd be hard pressed to find that many larger companies that are really proud of the data infrastructure they've built. And it's not for lack of trying. Like these companies are large, they have a lot of legacy. It's a very, very tricky problem. The data is so complex, and it's not just a scale problem. It's a complexity problem. I can give you one like example of the difficulty. And this is a sort of public story, but we work with Sanofi. Sanofi is probably $150 billion market cap, very successful biopharmaceutical company. They've definitely been sort of very vocal about wanting to become a pharma company that's powered by and leveraging AI at scale at all parts of their business, transforming the underlying data foundations, that 1,500 scientists in 30 different teams, lots of different homegrown systems, acquisitions, all cobbled together over a long time. That's a multi-year endeavor. It takes top level lead. It takes a lot of alignment across an organization.
You've just alluded to the fact that it's so important and powerful to get organized in terms of getting data structured and finding ways to make best use of it with artificial intelligence. What are the sources of sort of dark data out there that we're not capturing?
I think the industry actually captures captured in a traceable, structured, standardized, all in one place, like a way that can actually be reused. Some people in the industry call this like fair data and whatnot. I think that's very low across the board, even in the lab. Because we've got some scale now, we can actually do a bit of like benchmarking, and it's like, I think it's like a fairly good proxy for the industry. The last time we kind of ran one of these benchmarking exercises was that for our customers, 60% of their instruments are not connected. So
Today, still,
yeah. That means, scientists
even if they have Benchling implemented, that's still true.
Yeah, we are trying. Connecting instruments is hard, man. A lot of that is, instruments not related to Benchling. I think there's a ton of opportunity there. If I were to pick one, that's a really interesting example. I think in vivo data is something people are sleeping on, actually. Especially if you look at advanced modalities like cell and gene therapies, are in vitro models for predicting what's going to happen when you get to the clinic. It's sort of not appreciated how difficult that transition is, and these are very capital intensive modalities to go after. And so capturing better in vivo data there, and it's not just like mice. That it's the case here. You're running a lot of non-human primate studies. These are really expensive, and you get back these just like reams and reams of PDFs of like semi-structured data, and people have to spend a lot of time just error checking, copying into their internal systems, things like that. And it doesn't really it's much harder to leverage for actually building a robust model that's going to make the next cell and gene therapy more likely to get approved. And so if you were like, where do I pick to go focus? That's one that's been top of mind for me.
Benchling is not only an incredible life sciences vertical software story, it's a incredible vertical software story, period. And whether
there are not that many.
That's right. That's right. There are not many. And so whether you're building in the life sciences, whether you're building in healthcare, whether you're building in other highly regulated environments like financial services, or for any vertical, there's a lot to learn from the Benchling story. You started and did something non-obvious, which is you built software for academics who didn't have a very high willingness to pay. And
no willingness
ability to pay.
Yeah.
And yet you gave them software, you built incredible software for them, and you gave it to them for free. I'm sure a lot of investors didn't love that. So
nope.
So walk us through the calculus of that.
Yeah. And by the way, I think for all the entrepreneurs listening, it obviously looks good with the, connecting the dots in hindsight always looks better than at the time. Look, I think I really appreciate now how important a beginner's mind can be for starting a company. Like the naivety actually helped. Like I didn't understand the dynamics of the industry. I didn't know what an enterprise sale was. If you had told me when I was 21 that I was signing up to do like enterprise sales to big pharma, I would have been like, absolutely not. I'm not starting this company. I obviously very much enjoy solving problems for large organizations now, but I was a engineer who wanted to build some product, and I had good fit with the end user. The buyer and the user often aren't the same people. So you've got some different incentives that kind of cloud your ability to know, is my software actually good? And at first we were just build for ourselves at first, build for the people in labs that we knew, go to them, ask them why they weren't using it. If they said, hey, I'm not using it because it doesn't have XYZ, I need to do my job, then like, cool, you can show up a week later. Hey, I built XYZ. Like, we use it now. We just we hill climbed for a while there. I think it took us a year to crack 100 active daily users. I think a lot of people would have given up if that were the case. But the people who did use it really, really spent a lot of time in it. And I was convinced that we could keep expanding the sort of remit of the software to get more and more scientists over time. And like the snowball took a while to get going, but eventually it did.
You talked a bit earlier about, get them while they're young, right? Mm-hmm. And build, solve problems for the user and then hook them.
The title of this podcast is like the drug dealer strategy for
Saji says, get them while they're young. Yeah. You were about 4 years in muscle building mode. Eventually, you of course did make the jump to commercial sales. And when you go to your dry cleaner and they've got like the dollar bill framed, the first dollar they've earned, you have it on the wall. What do you remember about sort of your first commercial deal?
So there are probably 5 companies out there who think they were our first customer. And I'm probably not going to spoil who was the first. There are many firsts. There was the first like major biopharma company to adopt. There was, first, paying biotech customer. I'll tell the first large biopharma what that was like for them to adopt us. This is a kind of very famous biologics heavy company, at the time, tens of billions in market cap, probably crossed 100 now. So lots of medicines approved, super successful. And because they were so all in on sort of biologics and antibodies, they had actually invested in a lot of their own homegrown software to track and model all these things, all these biological, all these molecules they were working with. And they actually looked pretty extensively at us because this problem of having a unified data model that sort of reflects your science, that ended up being the core of what companies value that Benchling does, even if sort of scientist productivity is a little bit a layer above that. So they looked at what we had there because their science was evolving. It was getting more complicated. They're going from monoclonals to biospecifics. They're doing all kinds of stuff, and it's very hard to keep homegrown infrastructure up with that. They're not in the business of custom developing software, and they needed flexibility and things like that. We were still a pretty small team at the time, so they looked very extensively to us, and they did not go with us. It was like one of those like heartbreaking moments early on when you're like you really think you're gonna like get your first big break.
But in that instance, that you lost to the homegrown solution?
Yeah, they were like, hey, like what you're doing, but like we're pretty invested in this homegrown thing. I think it's gonna meet our needs. We're like, okay, come back. About a year later, I remember having the meeting with them where we're sort of demoing our software, and this is back before we knew at all what we're doing. The customers like, can I see? We're like, absolutely, pull out the laptop and start demoing it. No questions asked, and we go into it. And I remember how big the meeting was. There were a lot of people in there. And I remember that even one of a senior executive was like in there sitting through like hours of going through software demos. And even at the end of the day, actually makes us wait and is like, hey, you can't leave. Like, wait here. I have to go to this other meeting, but I'm to come back at like 5 o'clock. And we're just like, okay, this is probably pretty good. Like they wouldn't keep us waiting around for no reason. And like comes back and is just like, when can you start? And wow. In hindsight, like it's an important lesson that enterprises are not buying for the present moment. They are buying like multi-year. And I think what we had done was they'd gotten 2 data points. Like data point 1, they're like, hey, we like this data point a lot. But the second data point showed them how steep the slope of the curve was. And they were like, oh, wow, like this small team, like I think their IT organization is probably bigger than our company at this point. Their IT organization is just like, okay, like the slope of this line is very steep. These guys have made a ton of progress in just a year. Like we can see where this is going. Like we want to hop on. And I think, credit to them, like for taking a big risk at the time.
So given those stories that you shared about the early days and the fact that it wasn't a even straight path to success, which was more difficult, going from 0 to your first $1 million in annual recurring revenue, or once you arrived at 1, going from 1 to 10?
I think going from kind of 0 to 1 was 100 times harder than 1 to N. Don't get me wrong.
No.
It's all hard. You get better, but the early days are so hard. Before we were able to like repeatably monetize, we were very much a productivity tool, and we couldn't articulate and sort of champion the value of structured and centralized data for a biotech organization. And, I was so immersed in biology that I hadn't really thought about like what's different about some of these advanced modalities if you're building a cell therapy medicine or gene editing medicine or something like that. And it turned out the data model complexity was just so different. And that was like being able to solve that problem for biotechs was how we went from a kind of nice to have, scientists love it productivity tool to, hey, this is the front door for the scientists and all the data comes in through that. And then for the business, everything is in one place so we can actually make decisions. We can trace things. We can manage the process we're creating to make our medicines. And like, once we figured that out, that goes back to the data model piece I was talking about that large pharma. Once we figured that out is when things started to really take off.
I assume scaling from 10 to 100 presented its own set of challenges.
Really hard. Still hard.
Still hard.
Well past 100, but still very hard.
Yeah. And so like, what does that mean for you as a company builder, as the founder, in terms of how do you harden the systems within Benchling? How do you mature the company to ensure that you can go after that opportunity as you see it, and yet retain sort of that early DNA that you were describing in terms of what drove Benchling from the earliest days?
Yeah. Turns out you make a lot of mistakes. I would say the 2 biggest challenges kind of in that scale up mode. First one is the way you communicate to customers has to change. Like we got our early adopters were very attracted to the fact that Benchling was this, this set of Lego bricks that we could kind of put together the way they, like we had a shared vision and shared alignment, but it was a bunch of Lego bricks, and we would sort of like put it together, and they liked the ability to have their hands and on it and to shape how it goes, and sort of us showing up and be like, hey, we got all these Lego bricks, like what if we put it together that way or that way or that way? Like that was very exciting. But as you mature and you get more customers, people begin to expect you to come with like the fully finished product. And so we had to go from like a blank sheet, hey, you can do anything, just tell us what you want, we'll make it happen, to now where if I go meet a company doing, RNA vaccines tomorrow, like they're probably going to say like, hey, like you work with Sanofi and Moderna and all these other companies, like why don't you tell us what the best way is to set up our data model, to to plan out our experiments, to like manage the flow of information. How do we aggregate data? What problems do we tackle now versus later? How do we set up our like the broader ecosystem? People expect you to come with a perspective. And so it's like, it took a while to like realize that we had this domain expertise and to get comfortable going to customers, and not coming across as arrogant. We're not trying to tell them how to do their science. We're trying to tell them, hey, like, this is what we see across the industry. Here's a couple different options. Here's what we recommend for you, and sort of being more opinionated. I think two is like being able to hire more and more specialists is it's a double-edged sword. I can hire scientists who have been at cell therapy companies to go help cell therapy companies do cell therapy. Like that's pretty freaking awesome. Like it really leads to a lot of empathy to have sat across the table from someone who's done what you've done, and I think it helps with change management adoption so well. But then you hire a lot of specialists, and all of a sudden the customer is interacting with like 12 different people in the company. And so how do you make their life easy? Like, who do I go to if I need help? You want to have the best experts for every little thing. That's your advantage. But how do you actually knit that together in a way that's not like a really annoying experience for the customer? Like that's hard.
There are a couple of large players in the space, a couple of incumbents that look at Benchling and think, wow, these guys have done something right. How do you...
They know who we are and are looking at us. I'll be really happy. That's awesome.
Fair enough.
I feel like a gnat compared to them.
And so how do you stay on top of and in front of any incumbents that might start to covet what you've built?
Yeah, I'll give you my sort of general approach to competition, which is like competition. Like I would say one thing actually that's probably worse about vertical companies is the markets are not as competitive as horizontal companies. And so you can get a little unfocused at times, because when I hire people from horizontal companies who, whether they're like, Salesforce versus Microsoft or whatever, like they're used to being in like knife fights. Like it is, and you have to really focus and prioritize, because if you try to do everything in those companies, you fail. Competition kind of helps you focus and, be really declarative about who you are and what problem you're trying to solve. And I think that's like probably a healthy thing, even if I don't like it. I really care what the customers think. I get worried if I go to a customer and the customer says, no thanks, I don't want to buy Benchling, I'm really happy with ABC. Like that's when I take notice. Otherwise I try not to like over rotate so much. That means I got to spend a lot of time talking to customers myself, and I got to see I always ask our customers, like, have you bought anything new recently? Like, what is it? Do you like it? Should I get a demo? Like, and I meet a lot of companies that way.
So you've given us the story, the inspiring story of Benchling, or at least part one, the part one of the movie. Give us the trailer for Benchling part two.
Part one is we have spent 12 years now helping a bunch of companies digitize and get all their data in one place. I think the next 12 is helping them do something with that data, helping them make better decisions. I think I can, if I like look to the horizon, I can kind of see, hey, we've got research doing well there. We've started to get our foothold in development. Like someday we'll be in parts of manufacturing. You've got all this amazing data about the molecule and how it gets made in one place. Like, how do I help companies? How do I make them feel like I buy Benchling, I get my drugs to market faster? I'm very excited for that. I've been preaching structured data for a decade to a bunch of people, and I can actually show them why it's valuable. So
great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.